see, the Spanish, okay, the Christian and the Catholic Church literally split the world. And so Spain had claimed Mexico. Honestly, I can't remember when they first claimed the whole West Coast, Texas and all. But the Dutch, Polish, and Russian first made contact into the West Coast, Northern California, to where my people were, before the Spanish. They may have already claimed it, but never set foot here. And so the Spanish actually were mitigated to the southern portion. That's why you have like Los Angeles and all that, which was very and still highly Spaniard influenced or overwrought, because they didn't come north of Santa Barbara due to Juan. I believe his name was Juan Jose, JJ, and he was depending on your side, he was a bandit to the Americans, but he was a protector to the indigenous. Because of his alone actions, he kept the Spaniards south of Santa Barbara. If there was ever an incursion past Santa Barbara, no matter how many men sent out, one horse would come back with a bag of heads covered in blood, basically saying, don't do this again. And that happened a myriad of times. And in fact, he then became a raider, or as the historians of the American side would call it, he became a raider, or you could call him a liberator. He would go into these churches, these missions, and free the enslaved natives and leave bloody JJ on the wall, which is actually where we get Zorro. Huh. People say it's Juan Cabrero was a part of that, but it's a mixture of all these stories. But he was the liberator, and so he kept the Spanish from really exploring the few trails that they had. So the major defense to the Spanish incursion was the lake. There was a huge, massive, and I mean massive lake, the Tulare Lake as it's referred, but there's actually an older version of that, which used to go all the way up to Oregon. So the Tulare Lake was massive. And in fact, the Spanish first thought it was an ocean. And they thought the coast where they set up their missions was an island. Was because this large body of water, they would sail on it. In fact, they could sail, eventually did sail all the way up to what is now Sacramento. So they would sail from around Santa Barbara.
Wow.
Large, massive ships all the way through the Tulare Lake because it was that massive, that deep, to Sacramento. And so Sutter first made contact here, but he was actually the third person to attempt it. The Spanish had given 3 land grants before, but they sent them out and never came back. And so Sutter, he made this land grab, and he actually succeeded. He made it to approximately where his fort's at now. And
wait, was that before? Did Sutter before or after United States got Mexico, or you got California from Mexico?
Before. This was all under Mexico. So he was he made his way west and into Califas, or the west coast here, Mexico territory, Indian territory.
Okay.
Bounced up to Hawaii as Johannes Sutter, went up to Alaska, became Captain John Sutter, came back to Hawaii as Captain John Sutter, convinced the overthrown or the invaders there, because there was, occupiers in Hawaii, through Spain or through Mexico, got the land grant as Captain John Sutter now with his crew, which were enslaved Hawaiians. And so they were to come here, and the main kind of I can't think of the amendment to his contract for Sutter's Landing was that he had to relinquish his Americano ways and become a Mexican citizen. And so he was supposed to be now a Mexican citizen, no longer an American. No, you're a white man, but we're Spanish and we're white anyway. So we're just kind of claiming Mexico with the white superiority. John Sutter, please help us tame the West Coast. And so he, with his enslaved natives, succeeded. And so before that, like I said, the closest they had come to what is now Central California was the missions in, God, I can't think of the last mission, but
was it San Jose?
Northern mission. It was in It was in what is now San Francisco.
Okay.
I think it was.
I'm not saying
yes. The last mission.
San Francisco, yeah, one of them South Bay.
And so that was the first incursion inland, because before that they had, like I said, been on the coast and down south. So they claimed it. They'd never ever set foot in what is now Nevada, Colorado, Utah, Oregon. They claimed it all, but never touched it, never seen it.
They don't. I mean, it all that did was buy us time, really.
Well, and so you fast forward to the 1800s, mid 1800s, 1840s. The wars happening everywhere. California, or the West Coast, is purchased through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And so that ceded all California, Texas, all the West Coast to the United States. And a part of that contract, the international contract, was that they had to recognize the already established connections with the Native community and to respect the Native community. So there was already communities set up, and that's why we get here on the West Coast in California, rancherias instead of reservations. And so that's the only part that they kept. Because after that, they, of course, attempted to annihilate any and all natives that they found.
Let me
because
pause.
They just kept finding them. They just kept, they were expecting to have, on the Southwest, you meet a people and then you could travel days before running into another group because it was just that vast. But when they came here, they would, travel 5 miles, another group of villages. Okay, well, we'll go this way. Another group. They, say, okay, good. We haven't seen natives for half a day because they're taking some very odd, obscure route so that they could stay close to the coast and know which way they're going, because they couldn't understand geography and charting the distance. Because, of course, the first group of people who came to the West Coast weren't, contractors and builders. They were the enterprisers, as they call themselves, or just gold seekers or treasure seekers. And they had no idea that the West Coast have this abundance of resources, which, are great. But to people who aren't used to having to navigate, it's treacherous, and then you go this way and you run into a rattlesnake. They've never seen a rattlesnake before. They've heard up in Alaska, up in New York, how they used to have to fight bears, and then Minnesota they'd have to fight bears. They come to California, they got the black bear, the brown bear, the grizzly. They got the flat-faced bear. They got these massive deer with these massive horns, massive body weights that seemed,
menacing,
intimidating to these people. They didn't know that these animals were going to attack. So the idea, of course, was just to kill it. And so, you have enough resources to make your way through the plains, but now you're having to trek it up a mountain. You're having to pull it through a canyon. You're having to navigate over water. And so, the first people who showed up here were just unprepared and scrupulous because they were willing to do whatever for the riches. And they didn't even know what they were really looking for. I mean, it wasn't even like gold was discovered until there was already an established immigration into California.
Well, I need to
So
pause you real quick
Okay.
because before we start tap dancing into the G word, explain rancheria, because to me it seemed like the government was tired of dealing with natives anyways as America expanded. And so what is a rancheria for our new audience?
It's just like I said. It's just the accepted nomenclature, as my mom would love me to say. It's just the word here on the West Coast because the established Mexican Spanish influence, Latin. It's rancheria.
But was
And
it on a ranch?
well, I mean that's just basically what they call the Spanish. That's what they called land grants, rancherias,
Oh,
rancheros. That was just their again. It was just their framework, their terminology for spans of land. We would say villages, they would say a rancheria
okay.
because that's how they understood it. Like everyone lives in they besides a village. I don't know Spanish, so I don't even know if they have a literal word for village or what I mean. It's
Yeah.
just, and again, it's the subjugation of the native people. So they wouldn't refer to them as having a town. These aren't humans that have a town. These are like rancheria. These are the cattle on the ranch.
But calling it that, does that exempt the government from
No,
earlier
no. It's
treaties
just
and agreements?
it's in actually, I mean, in the Midwest and in the East Coast, I think there's actually different terminologies for
Okay.
reservations. It's just become kind of the uh, accepted term for all collecting of native people. The native concentration camps. Instead of calling them that, they just call them reservations. Here on the West Coast, because of the Spanish influence and the Guadalupe Hidalgo, like literally, it's in the contract. Now,
Okay.
of course, that also goes back to the United States and the accepted legal terminology for native peoples as merciless Indian savages. Because that is a legal term. That is a legal term. So you could, on paper, I am an Ozakashi Jew. I am a Sudan from this, you could claim merciless Indian savage is a legal term for native peoples, federally recognized native peoples. Now, as an unrecognized person, because that's a whole other can of worms, because that's the thing with the rancherias, is like you're accepted and protected to an extent on the rancherias. You come off,
Those
you're
rights.
you're in danger, and that also goes to the early application of the reservation system in the Midwest was that you legally could not leave your reservation without a pass.
Yeah, you had
You
to
were
apply.
you were on that land, and you were you were protected from outsiders coming in, but also like you were isolated from supplies and
Resources.
medicines.
Yep.
But again, it like there was for every one box of supplies and medicine, there was 3 boxes of bullets sent to the Indian catchers, to the to the guards.
So before gold, before the G word, I'm getting the sense, and I could be totally wrong, that like the people moving west, the businessmen, the explorers, the future fathers of California, they kind of just left the natives alone. They understood there was an agreement. You just don't mess with them. You go around, you find other places to do your business, right? So was that kind of the pace before gold?
No. It was because of the couple hundred years of slow expansion, the native peoples had been in actual early contact by the Russians. Natives had been made aware that these people were coming in, and so when they would come, the natives would, you know, hide or move. And in fact, like a lot of the Central Valley where the first landings were, this was uninhabited because, like I said, it was underwater most of the year. So there wasn't actually enough space here for a village or a rancheria. There was enough space here for a fort. And so at a certain point, at least half of the year, that fort was surrounded by water. You could literally sail up to it and offload and load your products.
And that's
so the water was,
Sacramento.
was here, and so that's what made this area, because again, all the water that was coming here, all the surrounding natives, like I'm here in Sacramento, so this is on paper Nisenan territory, but really it's not. Nisenan territory starts a little bit north of Sacramento. If you know the area, it would be North Sacramento, and from up that way is Nisenan territory, and then from what is referred to as Elk Grove in this area, south would be Miwok territory. What would be Yolo County, where about Woodland is now, would have been the beginning of Wintun territory, and that whole pool in between would have been water, which they would have sailed most of the year to get to what is now centrally called Sacramento, because it'd be underwater. But the water, again, California has always been warm, not as dastardly hot as it's been the last couple of years, progress. But, the water would dry up, subside, and the lanes would become more defined, and you'd make your way. And so in the summer, Sacramento became, lowland, very wetland that you could come and plant and harvest all sorts of stuff that the natives would come in and harvest. The main thing they would harvest in this Central Valley where we're at right now would have been tule. They would have made homes, huts out of it. They'd have made boats out of it, clothing out of it, all sorts of stuff they would have made out of tule, bags out of it. That would have been the main thing they would have gathered. And animals, there would have been mallards. There'd have been all sorts of fish, bass, salmon, and the salmon run. The salmon. So that's what the natives would harvest. So then when the Europeans got here under the guides first of the Spanish, they saw all these materials. And so out of Sutter's Fort, when it was the only central hub, because at that time, 1840s to 1850s, Sutter's Fort was the destination. So, you came from the East Coast, you hit Missouri, and then it was native land, undesignated. There was no such thing as Texas, Iowa, none of that. Maybe there was Iowa, I don't know. My geography's bad. But there was no, Midwest cut out yet. And so there would be, like Missouri, Sutter's Fort, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Oregon. It wasn't even like a town. It was like Oregon, land here, one spot. So it was a major destination for people who wanted to expand. And when they come here to Sutter's Fort, because Sutter enticed them to come here, told them, please come. We'll find you a job. We'll put you to work. But what he didn't tell them was that, you're not getting paid. Your payment is staying near the fort, and we'll save you from the merciless Indians, which actually they're working beside them. So these people who came here came to be laborers. So they, would be put into a job, apprenticed. And so Sutter's Fort was like a massive manufacturing hub. And so gold was discovered when Sutter paid off half of his first debt, which was for the fort. He took out a second loan for what would later become the town of, I think, like Freeport, because he wanted to make Sutterville. He wanted to make his own little place. It didn't work out. It became Freeport, I believe. And so He took out, like I said, the second loan from the Spanish government, from the Mexican government. I keep calling Spanish. The Mexican government for the town. And so he was gifted Sutter's Mill, which is up in Coloma. And so that was where he was going to manufacture all the lumber.
Oh.
Get my tongue twisted. The lumber to build this town, because it's beautiful country and the slough, the waterway. So he cut the wood there and literally floated it down to Sacramento. So one day, while they were down getting wood ready, getting a barge or something to float down, somebody sees glinting in the water. The natives say, "Oh yeah, that's that's." I don't even know what the original word for it was. And the guy picks it up and sees it. I think I'm trying to remember. God, I should remember. I know Indian history. I think it was like Kit Carson or something. Picked it up.
It wasn't.
Or no, oh no, was it
some dude Marshall or somebody?
Marshall, yes, God,
I learned that from you.
Yes, I forgot some stuff. So Marshall,
I pay attention sometimes.
Good, thank you. So he picked up, was like, "That's gold," and they were like, "Yeah, don't, it's worthless. You can't do nothing with it." He takes it to Sutter, and he, in a closed door, literally, like if you've ever been to Sutter's Fort, he's got what's called the Sutter's Lounge, and then behind that is his office. So he closes the door while Marshall and him are talking about, "Look, I found this chunk of gold," and then it was a good size, maybe a quarter pound or something, a sizable hand. Not just a small chunk, a rock. And so this little girl hears it. That little girl tells her parents. Her parents start talking amongst each other. Someone takes off to go look for gold. Somebody else goes looking for gold. Somebody tells somebody else, who puts it over the wire. Sutter wanted to keep it quiet.
Yeah,
Sutter thought he just hit it. He thought he hit it rich. This is my find. Me and Marshall are going to be, we could buy California. They're thinking, I don't know what they're thinking. So within 5 days of gold being discovered, being brought to the fort and discussed, within 5 days, 80% of his staff, and I mean, Sutter's Fort was massive. 80% of his people left to go find gold themselves. Within 2-3 weeks, because I guess there was already, slow migration happening, it began to pick up, because they were used to just kind of mosey your way here. Well, now there's gold, and somehow they found out about it along the way. Maybe someone found out back east and started rushing, telling everybody gold rush. So within a month, people had begun arriving, looking for gold themselves. All his staff had left. Sutter feeling threatened because of his actions. Now, I totally glanced over Sutter's Fort and the native treatment.
So let's do it. Because there's a lot of California, and that's why it's so complicated, dense, and you get tongue-tied.
Yes.
I have in my notes 1830, 1849, and 1850 as significant early dates here. So yes, let's stay on Sutter right at this gold rush thing. So you say 80% of Sutter's employees left. Did that include the natives that he kind of already enslaved?
Well, so they eventually kind of moseyed off. And in fact, they were, kept in a cell. So I can only, I think presumably someone had to go and get the labor out, because, mind you, the physical, moving the horses, baling, bucking, moving, hammering, that was done by the natives. The master craftsmen, the Europeans, would basically just teach the natives to do the hard labor. And so the masters had left. I hate saying it like that. And so the laborers were left there. Well, of course, there was never a physical military presence there, because Sutter would take 20 natives, random natives, maybe about the same ones, that fit these jackets that they had created there on site, which were an amalgam of the Mexican and Spanish uniform, and I think like a little bit of an American uniform. And he'd dress up 20 random natives, march them around with decommissioned rifles, or it's actually carved sticks, to have the illusion of a garrison. And so the natives obviously saw that, like, oh man, we're the guards are gone, let's go, because there had been escape attempts in the past. And in fact, there's the story of native women with children running out and a cannon being loaded with silverware, because they didn't actually have cannonballs on site. They'd shoot off those cannons as like fireworks to announce dignitaries and stuff. And so they loaded it with scrap and silverware, horseshoes, and shot it at natives.
That cannon's still there, right? The cannon that you're talking about is the cannon.
Yes. As a child, I told that story, and in fact, they showed us to this cannon pointing towards the Indian Museum, ironically, with this very dusty plaque that read "Indian Killer." They had that was right there for everybody to see, to celebrate. That was when I was a child. They've since taken it down. They've done a lot of covering up. So, the natives were, treated as non-human. They were actually legally classified as non-human. I don't know if you already know that one as well.
Yeah,
legally classified as non-human.
Yeah,
and so,
that term, though, isn't that because of the doctrine of discovery and an overflow of the Spanish?
No, it becomes the
not human thing.
Well, no. It comes from the United States Supreme Court. I think McIntosh v. Nightwolf. So this guy, Nightwolf, his neighbor, his cow kept coming into his land, eating grasses that he's been ordered by the government to grow. And, he's been told he can't leave this border, but this cow's coming in, so he keeps trying to push it out. Yeah. And so he tells McIntosh, I think that's the court case. I can't remember the night one, but the standing is, so he kills the cow, keeps coming in, ruins his crops, so he eats it. Guy takes him to court, says, hey, this Indian, killed my cow. The Indian says, he can't come onto my land. I told him if he comes on, I'm eating his cow. This is on my land. You told me I have to take care of my land. So he has no legal standing. And so the Supreme Court decided, well, actually, you're not an American, and in fact, you're not even human legally. So you don't have rights because you are designated subject on the reservation. You're not human. You're not a U.S. citizen. You don't have legal rights. So you don't count. So anything you do is wrong, and anything that is done to you is right. Sort of. And so here we are in California. Natives are held in pens, released in the morning to tend to the animals. After the pigs get done eating, the natives then are allowed to eat what's left over. Also, to just kind of further dehumanize the natives, any of those attempts, like I said, to get away, like I said, the women and children who I believe I'm related to, they got away. Ones that didn't, or men that spoke up, would have been decapitated. So if you go to Sutter's Fort now, they just put up this spiked arch on the old gate. I believe they refer to it as the South Gate. They replaced it like 2 years ago. They're all proud of it. It has all these spikes on it, and it looks imposing. It's supposed to. They would mount the heads of dissidents, of talk, those natives that talk back, or anyone who tried to run away. So the natives knew that they were subjugated. And so once the guards were gone, once everybody was gone, they were like, well, hey, let's go. So they took off. And so, with that being said, Sutter, now that he has freed natives who know where he's at, takes off. He leaves Sutter's Fort. He's scared.
Should be.
He goes to Chico. This is a really long story. He goes to Chico, and he has a place there that's referred to as Hog Farm, or the Hog Farm. I can't quite remember. I always just call it Hog Farm. He was there for about 2 weeks. So now gold was discovered about 2 months ago. He's hiding out in Chico. The fort is being overrun because, like I said, it's the only destination. So people are showing up. The fort's empty. So they start taking stuff that's left there. They stay the night there. And leave to go find their gold. So somehow, and I'm not exactly sure, no, I can never get a direct answer to this. His Sutter's Fort's house burns in Chico. It will. Anyway, then he takes off to the East Coast, and he lives in I think it was Missouri. I'm not sure. Oh God, I haven't looked at the thing in forever. But he takes off and he lives the last years of his life, decades of his life, in Pennsylvania. That's what it was, Pennsylvania. And he writes letters to the government wanting reimbursement for the fort that was overtaken. He wants to be reinstated as the landholder since his contract with the Mexican government, which he never held up. And so he gets none of it. And he dies in obscurity.
Good.
As he should, back east in some town, I guess. And matter of fact, I remember telling the story to some woman who's like, I'm from that town. I didn't even know Sutter was there because they don't celebrate it. And so 6 months into the invasion, we're still in like 1848. We're not even in 49 yet.
I know. We're like 35 minutes in this conversation, and we even haven't got to the like most fucked up, juicy part of all this saga. So this is why I love you. Gotta set the scene, though. You have to set the scene of how complicated and multi-layered and multi-government. You're doing a great job just laying it out. I like it.
So as the people begin to flood in, they of course spread out from Sacramento and begin establishing further and further up through the state. So they start reaching up north, like around Lake County and over to the coast. They want to just explore it because they think gold is just everywhere, which it's
kind of is.
Compared to other states, it kind of is. And so the land just becomes overrun. And people are amazed. The United States government, one of them, amazed at the massive population here. And so the first governor of California is elected, Peterson, I believe. And so he makes the first law of California. All these people are coming in here. There's all these natives. All these people who are coming in here are looking for gold, but corporations by 1848 had already taken a majority of the Sierra Nevada gold field, the Amador gold fields. And so now all these people coming into the state who are thinking they can just find open land, find it's all taken. And so they are offered jobs working in the gold field as, hundreds of people part of this massive factory kind of gold adventure.
Mining.
Yes. I mean, we're just talking hundreds of people with lining the river with a corporation sloughs,
Hydro
at
mining.
one point, hydro mining, separating it with the mercury doing all this stuff massively, and they just keep coming. And so the governor creates the first law called the Vagrant Indian Act, which basically says that any native found within the city is a vagrant to be arrested. Because they are not citizens, because they are not human, if you would like to purchase this native in jail, you may for labor. So they round up natives and sell them off to people who make them work their ranch. Because besides the people coming here looking for gold, you also have people establishing ranches to grow food for all these people. You have the San Francisco, which begins, people stop just coming in from overland, they start coming from the sea. San Francisco becomes established as this major port town, manufacturing town. So they have like all these hotels. Hotels need food. So again, that beckons to more farming, more slaves to do this farming. The natives already adept at agriculture, damn good workers, get put to work growing all this food, cattle, sheep, and all this to feed all the incoming people. It's kind of just like the self-fulfilling prophecy of this just black hole, really. And so to establish this, they, like I said, need to have labor. They're still fighting back east. I think this is just when the Civil War is about to break out. And so here in California, more and more people come. So these natives that people keep incurring, well, the United States puts a bounty on them. So besides arresting them, if you were to find a native, encounter a native, a hostile, because they didn't call them natives, they call them hostiles. If you were to kill the man and bring his head to the state capitol, they would give you $5. Now that was in 1848 up until 1910, actually 1890. Because in 1890, the bounty increases. Around 1900, the bounty increases from $5 for a man to $20. $3 for a woman, $2 for a child. Now you had to bring in the whole head because Native men, we have long hair. And so, honestly, we without the facial hair, well, anyway, just, you bring in a scalp, you want the most for it. So you bring in, it's a man. And so mostly men's heads were collected, women and children. Well, women.
We had a different fate too.
Yes, they were used for something else. Children as well were, taken as laborers or sent off to these boarding schools, which is that's a whole other subject. And so, thousands, millions of heads were collected, men, women, and children, from 1850 till 1924. Because, like I said, all these men came here, could make $5, I think, a day, maybe $5 a week. I can't remember because inflation was crazy.
Okay, so
$5 a week sounds like like nothing now, but back in the day, that could buy you.
So let's explain all this. Okay, let's slow it down because there's gold here, there's lumber here, there's a law made to deal with these vagrant natives, right? I remember from you years ago hearing about some land agreement, something where the tribe was supposed to claim their lands, let the government know, and then they'll file it by a certain date, but they didn't tell the natives that there was this deadline and what they had to do. So there was a huge loss of territory. And now with the gold and with the amount of money coming out of California, when was it made literally legal to do this? Because that first governor of California that you talked about said the only way the Indian problem will end is when they're all dead. So now you have people looking for gold to make money and people just hunting natives to make money.
Yeah, so like I said, they came here with the idea, the hope of finding gold. All the gold fields were claimed, and there's farms, and so they were being paid to go out and hunt. So they formed large militias. So there'd be these hunting parties, and the government would supply them with badges. So there were special badges. You have to search for them. They're out there, but you can find them, and it says Indian Hunter. You got that badge. It wasn't necessary to have it, but you could have it. And so you'd go out and you know, kill a bunch of natives, bring back their heads, and be paid. So, okay, so like this law, Vagrant Indian Act. If you find it, it usually was men, you could arrest them, and if they were in jail, you could pay their bail. If you paid their bail, you owned them. You could, get bounties on the heads. Um, if you found a child without an accompanying adult, you could adopt them as your ward. Mostly that was little girls. Now, like I said, this openly happened at the state capitol here in Sacramento, California. You could walk in there with the native person's head, be graciously received, check in with the clerk, offer your bounty. They'd go through, they'd inspect, they'd make sure that you had, all the genders that you said you had, cut your check. You'd go down to, the state fund, whatever, cash your check. So there's accountants, there was clerks, there were, storage facilities.
Yeah,
Because here's the thing,
receptionists.
accountants, this had to have government oversight, government approval, funding. They needed to expand. They needed money for storage facilities because they would take the money that they paid out, and they would demand reimbursement from the federal government for, and I quote, doing their job. And so the federal government, and I'm not quite sure where the whole heads came in, demanded to view them because the government, California could say, oh, we paid for 1,000 men's heads. And the federal government says, well, that's $5,000. That's
Yeah, we need to take a look at that.
we need to verify all this. So so the federal government would come and inspect what California was saying that they paid out. And so there had to be verification of this. And so there was an officer. For years this went on. Now openly. Now I'm not sure exactly when the office closed because, again, around the 1900s, people started recognizing that maybe we should be writing down all the gory details because previous to this, there was, newspapers. The Calaveras County is now cleared of its Indian problem. I think they claimed 3,000 natives cleared of the area or something like that. They had these numbers. They're proud of it. So I'm not exactly sure when the office closed, but it closed quietly, secretly, I imagine. Because of, we're talking, there's the women's suffrage movement happening, and they're still paying for heads in California. We're well past the Civil War. We're still paying for heads in California. You know what I mean? We're establishing, international roads. We're still paying for heads in California. So the office closed. I'm not exactly sure when, but I know around 1924, natives with the Citizenship Act, I'm sure that's when it stopped because the funding, legally we can't fund it. That's when the office closed. I was in the Indian Museum walking around, and I had federal agents in there going through my tour with me, and they corrected me. They're like, oh no, it was in 1954 was when the last head was paid for in California. 1954 was the last year the United States got paid for a native head. My mother was born in 1951. In her lifetime.
And this is 30 years after they became citizens. They're still paying and hunting.
Pete, you have to understand that, federally recognized natives, because what we're not talking about is that there was periods of time when, there was the terminations.
In the
See,
60s?
so, God, there's so much to unpack with this one. Natives being a legal problem, not actually human, first were terminated in California here in 1850 with the acts. Went to the federal government, decided we're not paying all these states for their native problems. Some are more than others. If you notice, like there's certain states back east that have no natives now.
Yeah.
So the states were like, why do we have to pay into this? We should give the power back to the states so they deal with their natives. So it went from federal to the state. Some states were like, this is ridiculous. And other states were like, wait, we're losing something. So it went back to the federal government. And then it went to regions government. And then it went to no tribes are recognized for a moment there. We're just going to terminate tribes here. Oh, well, with the new infrastructure of I wish I had the paperwork of this. With the new infrastructure of the BIA, we're now going to restructure it this way. Okay, well, we're now going to create classification. And so when all these terminations in and out, they became this criteria to become a federally recognized native. So think of this. You are living in New York. You graduate from high school. You want to go to college. You're like, hey, I'm going to apply for this scholarship for the Italian American scholarship. I know they have it.
Yeah.
Columbus of some sort. I just want to bring that up. Could you imagine having to go to your parents and be like, Mom, Dad, what's my Italian roll number?
Isn't it
we
like
don't have one?
natives?
I can't access this. Oh, okay. Well, how about applying for a job? And, you're like, oh, yes, I'm Jewish American. And they say, well, what was your grandparents' roll number? Because they had one. Because the roll numbers that natives have always had to attain, Hitler took that. And that's why there's that Jewish roll. So imagine having to provide your grandparents' concentration camp number.
Okay, but hold on. What gets numbers? Natives, Nazi,
horses and dogs.
Arab Jews, horses and dogs.
Well, no, the blood. So it goes to blood quantum. And so a part of the becoming federally recognized is the criteria that you have to be 51% or higher. Well, okay, so here in California, other states are different. Here in California, the criteria is you have to be 51% or higher California native blood quantum. So,
how do you maintain that over the past couple hundred years? Like, how do you?
Well, so oddly enough,
enroll them. So how are you supposed to?
Oddly enough, the BIA, whether you know it or not, if you actually descend from native peoples, actually has a record of you.
Ooh.
You don't have to do anything. They've been tracking you. I have the records of my family, of my bloodline, going back to 1840. Now, 1846, Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. California became part of the West Coast. 1848, 1848, California was established as a state. They have records of my family from 1840, when this was still Mexico. And I think it's just, they started 1840 with the people who are alive. But they have a record, and I've seen it, from them to me. And all the criteria, all of it, of how I break down. And so my parents are, we're, like I said, we're unrecognized. We don't have a rancheria. We never have had a rancheria, but they have records of me. They've been tracking.
There's records, but then again, you're past your student phase. So they have
Well, so,
records
okay,
of who you are, but you wouldn't be able to be eligible for a bunch of certain scholarships.
so that's where so the criteria in California is you have to have 51% or higher California native blood quantum. So if like you know in the 60s when a bunch of natives from the Midwest were put on uh, buses, promised education, training, job placement, job training, job assistance, get on these buses, come to the West Coast, come to the East Coast, come to Texas, come to these metropolitan cities. A bunch of natives were young kids, a generation, were taken off the reservation with these promises, dropped off in these cities. Now, it seems like they did this to immigrants about a year or 2 years ago. Just saying, or no, under the first Trump administration. So, if those natives who came from the Midwest mixed with any of my relatives, and I was like, 100% native, but like 50% Navajo and 50%
Yeah,
Maidu,
they don't claim that.
you don't count. Now, I could apply to be Navajo. Probably, I'm not sure their criteria, but here in California, you have to have 51% or higher blood quantum that they have through their records. So they're like, your great grandparents were 100%. You're this much, this much. Luckily, my parents were come from native parents as well. So I'm that's why I have very little facial hair. I've been growing this for like months. This is what I got.
I know it's one of my
We
favorite.
grow. So I have the 51%. Okay, good. You two of those. Wait, okay. So you have to have 102 of your people. All 102 have to have a 51% or higher California native blood quantum. Two of those 102 have to never left your ancestral homeland. And then you have to prove you were terminated or your tribe was terminated in the massive amount of terminations that happened up until your application date. And so we were talking, you alluded to this losing of land. So Bidwell in, God, I haven't spoken like this in a while. So Bidwell flooded to create the Oroville Dam. Through the underneath Oroville Dam are about 6 villages.
That's a mass. That is like the air. That's massive. That big old dam.
So there's a spot, a tributary of it called Bullard's Bar.
Yeah.
Bullard's Bar. Underneath Bullard's Bar is my family's ancestral village. Bidwell. He had a proclivity for young women.
Pig.
He's a pedophile. Just call it like it is.
Pigophile.
He took in this young girl, and she agreed to go with him if Bidwell would take her brother and her ailing uncle. They would come live with her. He agreed to this. Set up a little place for her to live with her relatives, and of course she would come in the house when she was needed. In history, apparently, she's referred to as the wife with no keys. I was telling the story to our former historian at the Indian Museum, the former what was her job? The museum tech. No, not archaeologist.
The anthropologist.
I can't think of her title. I'm going to give her respect and give her a title. So when I was telling her the story, she goes, "Oh, I read about her," and so she brought out this book. And in history, she's referred to as the wife with no keys because she wasn't allowed entry into the house she was brought in. And she brought her brother and her uncle. Brother brought his wife. Uncle brought his family. A bunch of Indians came, like we do. So in living there, she overhears talk of flooding her village. She tells her brother, who runs to the village and informs as many of the villagers as they could. Now, Bidwell had done all his legal duty by posting that this village, there will be flooding, be aware, stay out of the area. He did his legal duty by posting this in Chico.
In English.
In English. Where natives were not allowed to set foot in. Again, the laws being, Vagrant Indian Act. So the villages, as many natives could be saved, were. Of course, they had to run up these hills to get out of there. I think they had like a day notice, had to leave the world behind. Elders who tried. So they were gathered up. So they got out to the best of their ability. So because we didn't develop gills, for my people, we don't have any legal access, because part of it is you have to have never left your ancestral homeland, regardless of the.
So you just should have sat there and floated for 2 generations, hovered above.
Well, so this was in, the 1800s. So that was several generations ago. And so because of that, my people that were run out of our village were then put onto this plot of land. Now, it's recorded as the second smallest per capita. About, let me get this right. I think about 300 natives, which were, I think, maybe 20 families, were given a half an acre.
Everybody combined or each?
All combined.
So 300 people had to live on half an acre? 300
plus people, the 20-something families, you get a half an acre for all of you to share. It's not even enough room for a house and a barn. And so, of course, it was taken away a couple years later through another termination act. And so I'm what's referred to in California, there's a criteria of landless Indians. So the natives that weren't annihilated, that weren't subjugated, that weren't rounded up, because there were several rounding ups. Now, everyone knows about the Trail of Tears, but there's about to be the Nome Cult Walk, which was done here in California. So flooded all that area. Natives got out to the best that they could. They were gathered up natives. And there were so many of them. Now, if there was a small band, you could just kill them, but there's so many of them. And so they were gathered up in Chico and marched from Chico to Round Valley.
Oh.
Now we're talking the Miwoks that were gathered up from Calaveras. We're talking the Wintun. We're talking, the Maidu, the Nisenan, all gathered in that area. The Yokuts gathered up into Chico, marched over a very treacherous path to Round Valley, where there was already natives there. Now, if you've been to Round Valley today, well, don't go there today. I just warn you, it has become overrun. Well, 20 years ago, when my grandmother and her second husband was alive, my grandpa Louis, when they were alive, it was okay to go there because, well, no one messed with Louis. But it was always kind of a harrowing place. Well, now it's become overrun by outside people who've taken advantage of the California agricultural boom. And so it's a scary place now. So they're all marched there. And it's basically the same place it's been forever in history and its equipment and what have you. They have a store. They have a casino. They don't have much else. And it's this pit. And so they were marched there. It's a small, just desolate place, horrible, hard to get to. So, resources are scarce. And so they were just, tons of natives gathered there. And so there was a split within the acknowledgement of the Maidu people, the Konkow people, because the government said, wait, no, we moved all of them over here. So what's over here is what we'll recognize. You over here, because of course my rebellious ancestors broke away and went back home. And so there's this weird classification. So, there's all, California, we have casinos. There's only a few. There's only a few natives. The rest of us who are those that are even federally recognized don't even have casinos. And then there's a whole nother class of natives. So as if it wasn't already the bottom of the rung to be a native, there's an even lower native than that, an unrecognized native. That's where I sit.
So was Round Valley like California's attempt, just that's it for the Indian problem? Anybody left, we're going to put there, I don't want to deal with it anymore.
No, it was one of the solutions.
Okay. Like there is much more.
Like, all right, let's move them here. Let's just move them all over here. Now, of the God, I think like 13,000 natives, maybe 30,000. The thousands of natives that were gathered up in Chico and pushed into Round Valley, I think maybe 3,000 made it. Many broke off, many ran, like my relatives.
Yep.
But there was many that were just killed along the way.
Yep.
And so so oh God, and the sickening part of it was that from this movement, because this was a major California project. It was this California project. They were told to conserve their bullets and be creative when doling out punishment. So they were, infants whose mothers had died and who are starving. The soldiers didn't want to deal with the baby. The elders who were lagging behind. The fed up teenagers, the fed up 20-year-olds who are going to make a move. They it's spoken of that, the soldiers use gravity most, because if the Nome Colt walk, they do it. Like I said, they walk from Chico to Round Valley and then from Round Valley back. Not that same year. They go one.
Every other. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 1 year it's this way, other year it's back. It's treacherous. And that's after the roads being developed a little bit better. Now the trails being developed better. This was back when they were just literally making their way to Round Valley cutting through the mountains. It was disturbing. And this is a part of California history, and this is part of the known. And see, there's a part of me that, is, I don't want to say burdened by this knowledge, but I feel responsible knowing it to share it so that their stories, that their deaths, their torture means something, that it's recorded. But, when I was learning this stuff in college, Humboldt State, once a week, twice a week, let's be real. Yeah, I'd leave class crying. Because it's heavy. It is. But it happened. It's real. It's not just some sad story that people are making up to make. It's not, it's not those Sarah McLachlan commercials. It's these are the lived history of people. And I always like to say, whether we acknowledge it or not, there are people today living with the after effects of what was done.
Bingo.
Myself, like us, many California natives, they have no idea why this burden is laid upon them. And then to just kind of expound upon that and to come back where I think we're like maybe 40 minutes ago with ICE. It has always been a war on the brown. Now, I haven't got much sun because, it's treacherous out here. I work inside. There's always been a war on brown, and it's always been easy to pick them out, to pick us out, because we respond well to the sun. So we beam, we glow. And so after the Civil War, no, let's take it back. The expansion of to the West Coast. There was laws in some of these new developed states that you had to have a rifle to take on Indians. It was you would get fined for not having a rifle to take care to dispatch the Indians. That was a law. You had to have a gun. And that gun was always tied to manifest destiny and subjugating the savage. You know, those books that drew people to California, it said, if you encounter a native, they're all hostile. Now, many of these incursions that happen in newly developed states, Texas, Idaho, the natives, because there had already been so much movement through there, would go to certain areas and direct the people, go that way. There's a trail to go that way. Don't come this way to our village. Go that way. And sometimes they'd be killed for that. Sometimes these little spots, these would turn into trading posts to tell people, oh, keep going that way. You don't want to go this way. There's savages up that way. And it became this kind of thing of like, oh, the savages are going to harm you. Don't go that way. When really they were peaceful people. And so that illusion of violence kept them safe. But also that illusion of violence, any natives that were incurred upon were thought to be hostile and had to be killed. So then we have the United States established. We have the Civil War fought. The freed, enslaved people, the black community, the African American community, the freed community. See, it's, what do you call them? The New Americans.
I don't know. I call them slave descendants, but that's messed up too. I don't know.
Well, see, it's just, and it all goes to this terminology of what the master would call us. So these humans were freed and now wanted to become part of the United States, wanted to become part of the country that had forcibly brought them here. They didn't say, hey, let's go start a new life. They were brought here, told, go start a new life now out there. You were just, for, a couple hundred years raised in subjugation. I mean, in complete subjugation, because the natives could be subjugated and would get away, and they needed the labor. So their entry into the United States as a part of the American ethos was to join the military. You want to become part of free America? Okay, you can live on the vanguard in Indian territory. Oh, you want to be in the army? Okay, we're going to send you out to kill these natives. That's your job. Don't kill white people like us. Go kill these people.
Buffalo soldiers.
And so once that was a failed state, because actually many of those Buffalo soldiers, after they were taught to bathe, and I don't mean, and I've gotten grief, the whole American way of life was not to bathe. So once they were brought out of that and were like, hey, wash yourself, they were brought into these communities and became part of the community, because they were like, oh, okay, well, we don't care your dark skin, your kinky hair, all that stuff. We're like, are you going to be a jerk? Are you going to respect our women? Are you going to do what we say? Because it's not about, ownership into the tribe. It's the land and your accepted application of your resources to maintain the resources. So if you're working, if you're part of it, you're a part of us. And so once that failed, we have these integrated communities along the vanguard, which then become incurred upon by the further expansion. And so then it becomes this thing in Texas about establishing their borders. And so it becomes, at first Mexico and the United States were partners, really. I mean, even though it was the United States, it was Mexico. The workers, everybody there, spokesmen were native descent. and the landowners, paid their workers, and there was definitely a hierarchy in Mexico, but there was also like isolation.
Mm.
And then along Texas, it became this fight for that established, um, along with
Ports
Manifest
Outpost,
Destiny.
yeah.
Well, because they had to touch the ocean. That was their whole thing. I Manifest Destiny. They had to touch the ocean. And so with Texas, it was their first time being told no, basically. And so having to establish that relationship at first, was Mexico dominant, but as the America became more and more bold in their movement into the area, that became a fight over the border. And so that's always been this contested fight, was the border, the border. The irony being that Texas wanted to isolate itself from the United States in general as well.
So California.
And, well, no. They were California, as far as I know, is again, history written by the victors. California was ready and willing to become part of the United States. They wanted that direct established barrier between them and Mexico.
No.
But Texas always wanted to just be a free state. And so that idea of cowboy, Texas, America, it was always kind of this butting of heads, but they aligned as long as they were against Mexico.
Common enemy. Okay, we are going to take a few second break and inhale and exhale and let our brains process all of this.
Fix my posture.
But no, hot damn, it is it's a lot of necessary stuff. So I got questions brewing in my brain. I have to take a deep breath because I'm sitting here messing with the clapper. I want to bite it. I'm nervous, fiddling. It's I said to you 1,000 years ago, the information is offensive, but not being taught this information makes it a double offensive, right? So let that sink in, people. Okay, give us 42 seconds. We'll be back.
The association is a 501c3 that does not take any federal funds. We are powered by the generosity of our members and donors. If programming like Red Hoop Talk matters to you, please consider donating or becoming a member today. Every contribution, no matter the size, helps us continue our mission. You can make a one-time gift or set up reoccurring contributions. We even accept stocks and cryptocurrency. An association membership is just $25 annually or $500 for a lifetime membership. Membership is open to anyone who supports our vision and goals. Donate or become a member today by visiting indian-affairs.org, and together we can make a difference for Native country.
Woot, woot. I don't know what I smashed here when I was trying to do stuff. So, Michael Allen Ramirez, and I feel like anytime you tell me something, I have to let people know you're not making it up. What are some good resources for people that want to, because you can't tell us everything. I mean, unless we just do a 20-season daily program with you where you keep teaching us stuff. But what is a good resource for people to really see what you're talking about?
Well, any book by Vine Deloria Jr. And his cohort, Jack Norton, who's actually my relative. Both are the creators of the Native Studies degree, which I have. Yeah. So Vine Deloria, Jack Norton, David Hurtado, a great author. He's written several books. Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, an amazing, amazing female writer. A lot of the information about like guns and things like that, I got from her books. Howard Zinn and Native History. But like again, Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz did the United Indigenous. I can't remember.
Yeah, the Native Americans Guide to the History of the United States or whatever.
Yes, and she has a teen version too.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of my history of my people from my aunt, who's an author, a poet, Linda Knoll. If you've ever had the opportunity to hear her, she's a historian. I tell her constantly. I need to tell her more. That I know myself because of her. She has a great knowledge of history, which she got from her father and her relatives. If you're in the Native community, ask your relatives their stories. They lived it. You know what I mean? This stuff happened within our lifetime.
No, you've done enough.
It's
us being oral people. It's like, unless somebody non-native wrote it down or said it, it's not true. So that's why I feel like, okay, you think this is crazy, you don't believe him, go read this and then let me know if he's exaggerating or not. That's
great resource is it's a newspaper that used to be was the first newspaper established here in California, called The Union. It's no longer published anymore, but The Union was published here in California since like 1850, and there's a great amount of records in there. Just working at the California State Indian Museum, I've had access to a great library of living people, as well as many of the books that they have there. See what I got right here. This has kind of been my newest that I've been trying to read more. Red Pedagogy by Sandra Grande. I don't want to mess up her name. And it's Native American Social and Political Thoughts. And it's the 10-year anniversary. That's got a great amount of resources in it. I mean, if I just looked at all their, the bibliography of this, if you pick up a good Vine Laureate book, good Native book, Native Studies book that they have, the bibliography is my go-to with all sorts of stuff. Like I said, this was up until, I'd say World War II, come back from World War II. Native peoples, the atrocities committed to Native peoples was highly recorded and celebrated in the chronicles. I'm sure if you look at old National Geographics, they'll talk about the mystical Native peoples of Montana, and like I said, this was 150 years ago, not that long ago. This is current history. This is in history.
Yes. Well, okay. So you mentioned 1850. I want to learn about the 18 California treaties that just got kind of hidden away. And then I want to learn about the Indian Protection Act, quote unquote, of that era, which didn't protect Indians. It tried to protect white people from Indians.
So the Barbary treaties. Gosh, how could I not talk about it? I wish I had a map behind me. California, it's massive. Massive. Over 2 years, between 1848 and 1850, 18 treaties were made up and down California. 18 treaties. A lot of them. These encompassed the 109 tribes that are recognized today, though, according to the original Barbary treaties, there was 209 established nations, natives here, many of which were culminated into now current conglomerations. Like the Pomo people were actually like 5 different groups, but now all established as Pomo. Miwok people, so we're like 2 very distinct, actually 3 distinct bands of Miwoks, which were all culminated into, I think, 2 different kinds, different large, massive groups, which were then culminated and some just disappeared. 18 treaties, all of California, which is massive. And the way it was done so rapidly, it was very, very amazing. And actually, they weren't, of course, they all favored the colonizers, but weren't as atrocious as you would assume.
Yeah, wasn't it
A lot
like
of
giving
native
them clothes and stuff to farm? Like you got denim in a tractor or something? Wasn't that kind of in some of
some
them?
areas got that. Some
Yeah.
areas got legal access to water, which was running through their property.
Anyways,
Um, they already knew like we're not going to do anything about mineral rights, but we'll focus on land parcels. That was their main thing, was the land parcels, because like I said, by 1849, should I say, the rush had already begun, and at least 1 million people had already influxed into California, and I think altogether like 3 million came. So they were worried about land, and so they were going to parcel it out to these native people. That's where, like I said, my village was supposed to be recognized and established, but they decided they're going to make a dam, so they're going to flood that village. So there's 18 treaties. They were supposed to protect the native peoples, their land, their places, their lives. Some of them had like contingencies, you have to farm, but a lot of them were just like, you have to stay there, stay on your land. You can hunt. I think they all, going back to Roxanne Martiz, I think they all established that they can't have guns. That was one of the main things. Like, you can't have guns. You can have bows and arrows, do hunting, you can do fishing. And I think like for my peoples, especially up in the Sierra Nevadas, fishing was a part of it. That you still can fish at this areas during this time, but like the water was being used for gold mining, so certain areas you can't go to, and you can't do anyway. Sorry, 18 treaties sent back east. They were received
by the federal government.
When they were put on the Senate floor to be approved, lobbyists from the timber industry, because there was the redwoods, which was building America, which we have. Well, okay, so when I first started doing this, when I worked at the Indian Museum and I'd do the speech, I think we had 4% of the original redwood forest. I think that's even down to 3% now. The original redwood forest is just gone. Yeah. Lobbyists for that industry, making a lot of money, said, hey, here's some money. Don't ratify these Northern California treaties where the redwoods are at. Well, Southern California agriculture, which they were growing a lot of,
everything.
All sorts of stuff growing down there, farms, because the Spanish had already established a lot of farms. And
so there was the infrastructure.
Groves.
Yeah, there was a colonized infrastructure. Yeah.
So that group lobbied, well, hey, we we want, we don't recognize these natives down here because we want their land. If you give them land, we're going to lose farming. Of course, the gold industry, I don't even know what that was exactly, but the gold industry was like, hey, this is, if you give this village land, they're literally sitting on millions of dollars. They'll become rich. That's our money.
We can't have that.
So the timber, the gold, Southern California agriculture, and then the coast shipping, because the ports.
You need all that access.
They needed all that.
Land
so
from the ports.
Four industries. The 4 industries lobbied the United States, and I'm sure there wasn't a lot of pushback either to not ratify these treaties.
Well, they're not human, and they're in the way of progress.
So they took those 18 treaties, they put them in this box, they tied a red ribbon around it. Now, at the time, that was a thing, to tie a red ribbon around an envelope or a box or something. And that red ribbon, with the law passed saying that's not to be open for 50 years. And so that's where we get the term red tape, was that practice of the red ribbon around a package.
Because we weren't even supposed to be alive beyond 50 or 99 years. Like all these treaties kind of had built-in numbers, assuming that we'd be dead or assimilated by then.
Well, so with the lack of treaties, the first governor, Peter Barnett, thank you. Oh, okay, it just popped in my head. Peter Barnett, the first governor of California, created the Vagrant Indian Act because, well, there's no treaties. They're not established as recognized humans or citizens. So go hunting.
Go forth.
I think it was like 15, 20 years ago before I started school when I was just a wild Indian.
Woo!
I remember talking with a professor, educated person, I think they're a professor, and they say to me that, well, you know, what happened in California wasn't technically a genocide because they weren't citizens of the United States. And so for years, for decades, up until maybe about 10 years ago, it was an established belief that because they weren't citizens, it's not technically a genocide. It's just
it was more like an extermination of rats or mice or raccoons.
So those 18 treaties were put away. And in 1905, an industrious grandson from Southern California, one of the tribes down there, which had established rights through their original protection, went to law school, got his degree, and went to Washington, D.C. and tried to argue to get these treaties ratified. He was told that in 1900, this is 1905 now, he's in the Senate trying to talk to them to ratify these treaties. He was told that in 1900, the United States got out of the treaty business and now are in the act business. And so now to become federally recognized, it takes an act of Congress. And so that's where the criteria for natives came about first. There was termination, reestablishment, termination, reestablishment. And so we're in the status we are in today. And so they made it even harder through these terminations. They started adding stuff. Because I think before you had to just prove you were native. And well, anyway, it's like I said, over the years, over the decades, they've added to the criteria to make it harder.
Didn't you tell me a random fact a million years ago, like how much of California was promised to the natives? I want to say like a third of it, or like there was some ginormous amount of California that was supposed to be native land.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much.
Look, you would just go to school and then you would come home to visit your dad and then you'd unload like all these terrible facts onto my radio listeners and then disappear for the semester and then come back with like more just terrible facts that traumatize us. And then you'd bail again back to campus. So,
yeah, I can't remember, but a large amount.
But yeah, it was a chunk.
Southern California. Yeah. Well, through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, they were supposed to recognize the already established rancherias, which were massive.
Yeah.
So like Owens Lake, which if you ever see the movie Chinatown and they're fighting over the water, that's what they're fighting over.
But that Tulare Lake that you said used to go to Sacramento, that got diverted. Now Owens Lake, all this stuff is, you know, I mean, we love you, LA, but like they're getting like all of our resources, rerouting everything, changing things. Sacramento River got rerouted, like the whole shit fiasco they've done with California water is insane.
Yes, and so that's what I'm trying to put into context for you. So like the at that time, the amount of viable land was that was promised to the native peoples, and that was to the rest to the America. It was like a third. But then once they started diverting the water, they started opening up all these valleys in different places. So like today, it would probably be like maybe like a fifth or sixth of California. Still a large amount.
Yeah.
But like all the Central Valley, the farms, like that was not part of it because it was not viable. They dried all that up. That became a massive amount. I mean, that's like that was probably like a quarter of California underneath Tiller Lake.
Yeah, just that. Yeah, that whole middle part. Yeah, like it's like a third of California just in that valley between.
Yeah, and so the idea was to give basically the gold-rich areas with little parcels to the natives, and then it's kind of established this like uncomfortable neighbor situation, which actually kind of succeeded for a long time. I remember my grandma telling me about living up in the Sierra Nevadas and Plymouth, and as a little girl, in the like 1930s, going to the schoolhouse with everybody, and she was they were all, everybody just were mountain people. They were, some were white, some were Indian, and then there's even this little black girl in her class, and it was just like everyone was like, all right, this is how we're doing it. And it was like I said, an uncomfortable separation, but there was definitely segregation. I'm not going to mention the names of some of these places my grandma pointed out, but there was
segregation. So
yes,
what?
there was a black town, which wasn't called the black town, and then there was like the Indian place, and then there was I forget what she called it, but basically that's where like the poorest of the poor lived over there, and they'd come to school like once in a great while. But it was just this, accepted segregation and kind of, my grandma never went to the store on certain days because they weren't allowed. And it was just this kind of, like I said, uncomfortable thing that they lived with for a while.
Okay.
And then it became more and more incorporated, and it became like this, what it is today, basically.
But what you're sharing is not an ancient unknown history. You just told me something that your grandma told you that lived through it, right? Your mom has memories of things like this. And same thing with African-American Black slave history. Like, oh my gosh, you have to have this to put this all into perspective, because it's not an ancient dead thing we're harping on. It is alive and well in how we raise our children, and the memories we have, the relationships we have with our government, and the way even to modern times now. What I'm hearing is Brown has always been useless to the United States, right? So turning ice
easy
loose,
target.
yes, so turning ice loose is such a logical step to the government, because they've already done that here a few times. So let's just go do it again. It's easy.
It's this, the dehumanization of it. There's in the, like maybe late 80s, early 90s. I remember this commercial, and it was vicious. They had this table, and it was they said the immigration problem, and they showed like this cockroaches crawling across this what's that thing called, the immigration center, or the where you drive through, and it's talking about we're being overrun, and they showed these cockroaches, and that was in the 80s, early 90s. And so it's always been this thing of like an easy thing, especially when they speak Spanish or they have certain names, and I mean,
You're
like,
not this. You're not that.
and
Yeah.
and it's so the communities that come here to establish themselves as part of the United States, who come from overseas, they don't look like the people here. And then even the realization, I mean, people look at me and they're like, wait, you're not like super dark, because like, I live inside now. I work inside.
Yeah,
I
you're an
need more
indoor
sun.
cat. We've known that.
Yes. The fact that I have facial hair surprises people, and it's
It's
because of
not
these.
really facial hair, though. Like, I want to put mascara on your mustache just to help you.
But I wore my nice necklace so it stands out.
Yes,
But
you're pretty.
if I'm talking to somebody and like I don't have on a necklace, they're like, "Wait, are you a real Indian?" And again, that goes to like these levels.
Yes.
And so there's the use of skin tone, and the othering, and even within the own community, othering, because there's like, are you indigenous, are you Mexican, are you Latino, are you Latinx, are you I say I'm Konkow, but I say indigenous so it's easier for people to understand, because if I say Konkow, they're gonna be like, what? That's the name of my tribe, name of my people, the name that my ancestors used for themselves. But am I allowed to call myself that and be recognized? I'm not even allowed to legally call myself an Indian because I don't have that card, because this outside force has come in and established that there's criteria to be you. Could you imagine could you imagine them saying that to, oh, well, you can be a real African American if you can, prove what plantation you came from. To force somebody to subjugate themselves to an identity that was stolen from them and forced upon them at the same time.
Well, and people too talk about tribal council. That's an imposed tribal government that we have to abide by to have relationships with the BIA or the government. So even how things are run today isn't how they were necessarily run by these nations. It is now structured in a way the government can control or relate to or monitor.
And just to also, the Midwest, you'd have, uh, I want to say, not a council, not a court, but you'd have, well, again, in the colonizers' terms, a cult, a men's cult that regulated what was happening in the men's community, helping raise the young children. There'd be a woman's society or court. Society's better. I like society.
Okay.
That would help raising the young women into being who they needed to be in their families. But also that there were, not to just to throw this out there, that there was some women who were over in the men's circle. There were some men over in the women's circle. And it wasn't that there was this, exclusion to the others. It was just like, all right, well, this guy.
Get in where you fit in.
Yes, he could help out with this. You know what I mean? Like, it could be something as simple as like, well, he's got these really long fingers that can get these seeds. Dude, you got a job here, and it wasn't that this.
You're tall. You can reach. You can reach good apples.
Thing. Yeah, it was just that that there was the, really within. Well, okay, I can't speak for a majority because it wasn't all the same, but for most Native communities, there was just the work, and your sex didn't matter until it came to ceremony.
Yes.
You could be the hunter for your family. You'd still go out and acknowledge your woman dance part. And not with that, it's a bad part. You can't have the boys dancing without the ladies keeping them whole. Those ladies are maybe just as important as the boys inside dancing. Those singers, they carry those songs, and maybe there's a woman in that circle of singers because of her tonal voice. That doesn't take away from her being a good mother. That doesn't take away from her being, feminine.
Yep, less feminine, too feminine, not enough. Yeah.
And again, and then again, that like concept, because today there's such, I mean, like, if I had my earrings on, my long hair, you know what I mean? People would be like, oh, that's so alternative. When it's like, no, see, there's culture behind these things. These cultures behind the earrings, why we do these things, the markings on our face. And it's not this easy conformity thing of male, woman.
Yeah.
There was multiple purposes behind these things.
Yeah,
And
I asked my aunt in the 90s, she was like, where are you going? I said, I'm going to the gay clubs, 1990 something. And I said, what did the Choctaws say about that pre-colonization? And my aunt straight up was like, nobody fucking cared. Just go to work, right? Like nobody cared because you came together for the greater good of whatever that group task was for the day. Nobody cared. Like in the most loving way.
And it's like, you had your wife and her brother. Maybe they were like twins or just like really good friends. They were attached. You married her and the family.
Yep.
So that brother became your brother, and so you helped raise your kids together.
The family,
and if something and if you weren't there, brother would step in and carry on for you to maintain that these kids had the balance. And if he never got married or if auntie never got married, it wasn't this crazy thing because even in my modern days, people tell me like, when I graduated from college, some of my elders were like, stay single. That way you can move around. You can do what you need to do. You don't have somebody with you. You don't have to worry about it. You can focus on the people. You could, and so there was people like that. And there wasn't this overwrought sexuality. There was attraction, but it wasn't, there was an understanding that lust was bad. Anything in excess, if you lost control of like there was no such thing as a stalker of humans. You're a good hunter to go out and get deer, to get raccoons or squirrels.
Yeah, but you don't do that to your girlfriend.
And that impulse, you know what I mean? And then there was impulse control. And, it wasn't that, teenage boys, weren't disgusting. They were led by responsible men and women who, told them to keep that in balance, like, you have, but again, too, natives went through puberty a lot later, so they, weren't 14 with these new hormones. They were like 18.
Okay, is that a fact? Or are you just saying that a fact because you were a late bloomer?
No, that's a fact.
Okay, I'll take it.
No, I mean, like within the native community, there's the puberty dance, and pre-contact, it was about 16 to 22 when a woman hit her first moon or menstrual cycle. So it wasn't like, and girls matured faster than boys. And so, men at 18 were like, kind of like would be 14 today.
And it's getting younger too because of access to the internet, because of chemicals in our foods. And
just biologically is what I'm saying, again, very simple diets, like no hormones at all in any of your food. So you naturally aged. With all the foods we eat today, the milk and everything we eat today, like we're speeding up our maturation.
Yes.
And so back in the day, it was a slower process. Women here on the West Coast at least, used to live somewhere around like 120.
No, and it's like documented multiple places. I thought some of you old Indians were exaggerating on how old grandma was or the relationships with your great grandmas and all this stuff. But over and over, I mean, it's been verified that the ages have been verified.
Men could live as old as 90, but would average around 80. But they could top out at. But so that was the thing. Men didn't really hit 100.
Well, what does that tell you about the value of women to the species, to the culture, to the everything, right? So we have to stick around longer to take care of 2-3 generations down the line, etc. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm going to play one more little quick clip here. And then I need you to think about, because we're going on like 2 hours here, dude. Like no human can absorb this much. And you freaked out the square. You've done everything I expected of you. So thank you. But let's play a 15-second. And then, what is it you need to use this platform for? Or maybe what we need to know about not repeating history that you're so aware of. So let's see here. Let's take a quick 25-seconder and we'll be back.
Support Native voices and look great doing it. Get your hands on the limited edition Red Hoop Talk podcast shirt designed by a Native artist. It also features our hashtag Everything Back campaign on the back, demanding the return of culture, lands, and sovereignty. Every purchase helps keep Native stories alive. Visit indian-affairs.org to get yours today. Wear it, share it, support it.
You're going to get one of those t-shirts for participating. We could be twinsies. Could be twins. But okay, so to sum up, it seems like this racism is so ingrained in the federal government's perspective that brown people and black people are disposable or are cockroaches or are not doing enough or are saying too much. Or so it makes sense to me now, understanding why this administration is just playing on that so much by ending DEI, by ending all these ingrained problems of us existing, because we have been a problem for America from the beginning.
Oh, the term that's always been thrown around was progress. And the concept that the development of this land into this viable, beautiful park, which actually was maintained by native hands for tens of thousands of years.
Yep.
This belief that the only righteous, the only significant is a white man. That's unwinding all of the things that had been fought for people to be acknowledged as equal, not even equals, but just as human, viable people who are collectively under the same law, all on the same land with the shared history. But there's this constant erasure of others to create this illusion of white supremacy, it's not even, it's framed as Christian nationalism. It's not Christian. In the Bible, it doesn't say anything about, a man subjugating his woman. It's, honor thy neighbors and burning bushes and stuff. And this concept has always been about male, has always been about aggressive. Ooh. It's always, about the domination. There's a reason that there's been not any pushback about, Mother Earth, care to your mother, because the idea, especially with the internet now and the reaching out to a culture of young men, was, you have to be strong, and strength comes from aggression, and aggression comes from, aggravation. And if you're not aggravated at what you've lost,
then you're not a
meaning
man.
That everything was theirs. Meaning that the progress that they have attained has been the overtaking of the native land, the overtaking of black culture to make it rock and roll, to make it what they want, the overtaking of Hispanic culture to talk about liberation and bravado and strength and American agriculture, which has always been a brown run industry.
Yeah.
To take away the history of and really to rewrite, because it is a jagged history of women's issues, has always been white women first. And it has always been this, what about the children when we have to protect them from these other influences? And it has always been about them creating an influence. And by them, I mean it is powers that be, because it's not just, the United States anymore. It is a power structure which is built out of European colonization, but has spread out, and now in its infinite tentacles has grabbed its sources of power and is doing whatever it can to maintain those sources of power throughout the world. But here in the United States, we are trying to create this land since the 60s, and it has been a hard-fought one. Dogs have been called out horses. Kent State, which we were almost on the verge of here in Sacramento, in Los Angeles, in California. It's been this history of, dominance, and instead of this shared history of growth. Because if we examine how we have grown as a nation, it has been through the recognizing of humanity into the world, into our world, into our people. That has been what's made America great, was, the civil rights and the expansion of voting and the expansion of protection and the decimation of segregational practices, government segregational practices. And so here we are now, where all those gains, all those accomplishments are being erased. And I don't think that they have the powers that be right now, especially the Project 2025, which is the Southern Heritage Center, all those, that white man, and I hate to say it like that because it's a sickness, that greed, which has overtaken their need to educate, overtaken their need to provide this medical coverage. They're deconstructing our military. To what end? You know what I mean? And to eventually replace them all with drones. But why erase these things unless at the core, it's this lack of culture. It's this lack of accomplishment. It is this lack of being exceptional. It's not, the America celebrates these holidays and all these victories. They celebrate America and Americans, but yet in 2025, we are still hitting benchmarks of racial, what's the word?
Disparities?
Well, not just that in 2025.
I'm just throwing words at you.
There's still things that are like when are yet to be recorded. There's the first first native anything. Let's talk about that. First native mayor, first native governor, first native senator. Well, now we have a couple senators. We have assembly members. First native president, first Democrat, Republican, actual native. We haven't had a female president. in 2025. 2 years ago, a racial slur was finally removed as the name of a football team that was yelled in stadiums. There's still, the first, we just recently had our first, was it Black spacewalk? We had first female spacewalk. We've had people land on the moon. We've yet to have one woman walk out in space. There's still so many things which, at this point, the lack of these things is
that's going to kill us.
It's not just going to kill us. It's at this point, there's no reason that these things haven't been done except for movements to keep these things from happening.
Agreed.
Some of these things naturally would have happened by now, but that the fact that they haven't is a sign that there is aggravation to keep these things away from us. After each election, there's always this, or before each election, there's always this push that we have to get these things done. But afterwards, there's very little talk that the adversaries are still at it. Even though the election is over, there's still people working towards you not having the ability to cast a ballot next year. I mean, there's still, fighting over voters' rights, and there's still a push to keep people away from voting, which is why I always tell people to go out and vote. If it didn't matter, they won't keep it from you. And the proof that there's movements to try and take the vote away is proof that it is power. And the fact that there is still movement in 2025 to take the vote away from
Browns, blacks,
brown people. The fact that there's this whole accepted, just free talk that the illegals have to be. These are just, these are people. People have been here. Okay, well, what about other? If it was about illegal immigrants, I'm sure there's tons, and I know a few, and I don't want anything to happen to them, but they are completely safe. French citizens who are here, no, they have no fear. They're not clamoring, I got to carry my passport. I got to make sure to get